Hello.
Okay.
This
Hi.
is Hi. We're speaking on February the 6th of 2024. I'm John Anderson of the Historical Society, interviewing Richard Travers, who's lived in Medford all his life. Uh, the One of the things we're going to talk about this afternoon is the sort of role cars have played in people's lives. And uh, Richie, can I call you Richie?
Sure.
Richie grew up and went to Medford High School, graduating in 1959. I graduated from high school in 1965, but I think it's fair to say that the way people and cars react is a lot different now than it was then, particularly for men, particularly for young men. My dad was a Studebaker guy. Back in those days, you were either a Ford guy, a Chrysler guy, or a General Motors guy, and Studebakers were sort of weird, and all the foreign cars were even weirder. Detroit didn't take Volkswagen. Detroit thought Volkswagens were just a big joke, and the Japanese cars hadn't even started yet. So, uh, you've lived in Medford all your life, Richie?
I've lived there. Yeah, I was born in Medford. Lived on Cross Street there next to City Hall before 93 came through. And when 93 came through, we were forced to move out. And my parents bought a house here in West Medford. And I've been here ever since, 49 Johnson Ave.
Okay. Now, you graduated from Medford High in 59.
That's when I graduated, right? 1959. As a matter of fact, a few of the people are trying to put the 65-year reunion together this year, and the crew that did it before just don't want to do it. So they're asking me if I can get a hold of some of them. If we can get 20 people together, they'll come and show up.
Well, now, Paul Donato was in your class, I understand.
What's that again, John?
Paul Donato was in your class.
Yeah, Paul Donato was my classmate of mine. He's the current representative of section of Malden and Medford. Not my rep, but Medford, sort of north and east Medford,
How
the
about
Fulton Heights area.
How about Michael Bloomberg? Was he in your class?
Well, Michael Bloomberg graduated the next year, 1960, along with my sister, who graduated the same year. So I never knew Michael, except
Okay.
for his New York
Yeah.
mayorship there.
Yeah. I read somewhere that when he was in high school, he was president of the Slide Rule Club.
Well, I think that might be, in fact, in the yearbook, my sister's yearbook. It might have been. He might have posted that in there. I simply put down a bookkeeping class. That was it.
Okay.
I didn't have anything about racing or anything else.
How
Mine
come?
was very simple.
How come you didn't have anything about racing?
You know, we did have a lot of guys that came out of my class that became very kind of famous. One of them you might have heard of was Paul Thoreau. He's a
Oh,
writer.
of course, of course.
Yeah, well, he was my classmate. In fact, he went to junior high with me.
Oh,
And one time, we at our 20, want to hear a little story? He on our 25th reunion, he wrote an article in the Boston Globe. He wrote an article in the Globe, and and he got me mixed up with another fella uh, who joined the tank corps. He thought my name was Richard Trabino, who was in my class, and he
oh.
joined the tank corps in the army. But he mixed it up in the writing. But that's all right. I straightened it out when I saw him at the 50th.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family? Parents, brothers, sisters, children?
Sure. My family, my mother grew up my mother and father both grew up in East Cambridge. They came over. My dad was born in Portugal in the Azores, Saint Miguel, and he came over when he was 4 years old to landed in East Portland Street, Cambridge. And my mother was born here, but her parents were her mother was born in Brazil. Her father was in Portugal. So you could say I was a purebred because both parents were originated from Portugal.
Huh. Interesting. I was just
Yeah,
having.
and my grandmother, had 16 children, 8 of which lived long enough to get married. And so we had a big family initially. I think we had over 105 first cousins.
Wow.
And we continued to grow and sprout. So, but it wasn't the Travers family, it was the Reposa side that was big. My father's family had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls.
Interesting. And how about you?
Me, I stayed sober all my life. Although I did stay with 3 girls more than 3 years each. One was in high school. Went around with my kind of neighbor. Her name was Carol. She graduated in 1958. She passed away a few years ago, but I went with her for about 3 years. Then she moved out of California when Route 93 came. They got rid of their house on Riverside Avenue, and she went to California with the family, and she met somebody out there and got married, had a couple of girls. And the other girl I went with for about 13 years. She just passed away last Thanksgiving. I was with her for 13 years. Very important years in my life, my racing years, and some tumultuous times I had during those times.
Okay.
And currently, I've been with my friend now for close to 35 years.
Wow.
Still with her, Donna.
Well, tell me this. Getting back to
and
the
that's
subject,
where we are.
Okay. How and when did you get interested in fast cars?
Well, it's there's a little story. When I was only 14, I worked with my dad, who owned the Travers Fruit Company in Boston on the North End. It was a wholesale fruit place. So every time he drove a truck to deliver some wholesale fruit, he'd let me drive on the side when I was actually I was only 14 at the time, even though I wasn't supposed to drive till I was 16. And so I actually, started getting excited about driving when I was 14. But actually, what I had aspirations on fast cars in high school. Had a good friend of mine who was also a classmate who used to he had tons and tons of hot rod magazines of the 50s and 60s, and he kind of read through all of them to find out what cars were the fastest at the time. And we used to talk back and forth, and he convinced me that certain cars were the fastest. I had to start out with a 60 Sunliner convertible, 352, 300 horse. Now he kind of get mad at me because they had what they call a mechanical lifter in 1960 with 360 horse, but I was talked out of it by the salesman because they only had a 2-month warranty instead of a 3-month, and they said, and of course it was much faster. It had 60 more horsepower back then. And matter of fact, it was one of the first stock cars, one of the fastest stock cars of that year between Chevrolet, Pontiac and Ford. They used to have these three-way races, drag races. And the Ford with the mechanical lifters, I had hydraulic lifters, and that basically that was the difference between the two cars. Although the 60 car had the 15-inch wheels, and the one I had only 14-inch because they had bigger brakes. And in any case, so I kind of just scrambled around with that. I used to crank that up there. But 93 had just opened up for the most part, and Medford went north. And I used to test the limits of it on 93. And
so you bought this car new?
What's that?
Did you buy this car new?
I'm sorry?
You bought it as a new car?
Well, I didn't get it.
You bought this car
I said
brand new?
Well, I didn't get that.
Did you buy this car when it was brand new? It was a new car when you bought it?
Well, the 60, the car that I bought that became, and when I got into racing though, was the 66 Plymouth Chrysler came out with what they call a street Hemi in 1966. And that was the most powerful stock car that you could buy. I remember I paid, it was $1,000 extra for the engine. I paid like $4,000 for the car. And of course, everybody was buying it. So everybody would say, who's got the fastest car? The fastest car in the city. And we used to hang out at Richard's Car Hop at Wellington Circle years ago. And there was a couple of other guys that we used to hang out with, and we kind of raced. And we set up a race one time on 93, starting from the exit Roosevelt Circle, and we measured off a quarter mile, and the quarter mile marker was the exit for Stoneham Spot Pond there. And what we had, we set up the two. Both of us had Hemis. I was a little heavier than my partner at the time, so I let him. I said, "I'm going to have you drive," because this other guy came with he didn't have his he took his seats out of his car, he lightened up his car. I said, well, I'm a little heavier than you, so why don't you get in the car? And he raced the guy, my partner. And so what happened is we had somebody standing in the middle with a flashlight, flinging down the flashlight, just like you saw in the movie American Graffiti. And the guy said 1, 2, but before he came down with the flashlight, the other guy took off, right? And then my guy took off and tried to catch him, but didn't catch him. So we were screaming that he jumped the light. So we did it over again. The second time, he beat him. He beat the other guy. I think the guy whose name was Majnik at the time. He had the Dodge. I had the Plymouth. So. But then he claimed that he got a flat tire. So we were going to do it a third time. Then the cops came when we both took off and got away before the cops came. So the race, there was some guy had a $50 bet on this race in Richards. That's where we met the guy. He said, I'll get $50, says Travers will win, blah, blah, blah. So I said, I didn't have any plans. It just happened to be a friend of mine, So he got his $50 back because the race finally, it never took place because of the first time he jumped the light. The second time he claims his tire went flat. And we took off. And the race never took place, except it did when we went to the drags at Sanford, Maine. And that's when I was driving at Sanford, Maine. It was called a grudge match. And I beat him straight out there. I had a what they call a big a bigger numerical rear end than him, like 488s, while these other guys were going around with 411s, they used to say. So mine would accelerate a lot faster. So, my car, I believe, was cut in the 12s at the time, 12, low 12s. But we did that for like about a year. And then, the best you could do, you might win $125 after beating the heck out of your car. So I said to Dave, we got to do something else. And so that's when he worked at Commonwealth Dodge in Boston. And his friend, our friend Leo, who was also the guy who helped us out, worked there. And he called me up one day and said, Rich, listen, they got us an A100 here, and they want to get rid of us, a slant six and so forth. What if we make an offset out of it and race that? Maybe it'll be much faster. I said, yeah, let's do that. So they sold the car, for the A100 to me for $1,600, and we built the Dodge Fever from that truck. And by taking the engine out of my street Hemi, we revamped the engine, put an injection on, a fuel injection, Hillborn, and we made a sub chassis for the pickup truck. And when we first played around with it, we were going to run it on four wheels in an altered class. In fact, I think we turned in the nines with it, some 130 plus miles an hour when it was on four wheels. But then he tested it one time, Dave, and over at Chrysler in Framingham, I guess it was. And things started going up in the air. So it lifted off the ground a little bit, right? So that's when I had the idea about wheel standing, although there was, for about a year, the Little Red Wagon would do wheel stands at the drag strips. So I says, let's build a wheel stander, because the wheel stander, they'll pay you to come to the track. You won't break break your motor, running it 4 or 5 times and putting all kinds of money, and you're going to win what, $200, $300, that's it. But they were paying the performers to come at $750.
Wow.
So that's what I did. I wound up we wound up building the Dodge Fever truck, and it only ran for three months. We built it like in '67. We tested it on four wheels in '67 and '68. We ran it May through July. I got sick and couldn't make a booking. We had that booked all the way through the summer. I had to like almost $50,000 in bookings back in '68. That was a lot of money, and going around the country. But unfortunately, I was the driver, and Dave was the mechanic. And we tried to make a book. I was in the hospital, so I couldn't be driver, but he didn't want to miss a booking we had up in Canada. So he did it himself, and he made. I understand he from what he told me, he made two runs, and the third run he flipped it and crashed it, and that was the end of Dodge Fever.
Oh no!
So by the end of that summer, '68. I was still kind of recovering, but he got a hold of a '68 Superbird or a '68 Plymouth, and says we could put, by the end of that summer we were racing in B gas in this thing we call the Rumblebee. I was racing that in B gas, but at the end of the season, I said, Dave, this is the same thing what we were doing before. There's no money in it. So we kind of split apart. He went his way and built another car, and I went and funny thing, I was driving. I used to work at Schmiller's grocery store in Brookline and delivering groceries and stuff, and I'm on Soldiers Field Road with a car, and I see this little red A100 truck, at the lights there on Everett Street and Soldiers Field Road. and it's some appliance company. So I yelled at the guy, "Hey, you want to sell that truck?" He says, "Yeah, I'll sell it." I said, "There's the number on the side." I called the guy and I bought the A100. He had a little slant six for like $700. And then I built the Dodge material truck, which I ran for about 4 to 5 years. And we've put a supercharger on that one. We're turning out over 1,500 horsepower. I think I broke at least 4 track records around the country. And finally, I got out of the business after about 5 years.
Well, now,
And I went to the taxi business in Boston after that.
now, when you say you broke a record, what kind of record was it? Are you talking about wheel standing or quarter mile or what?
Yeah, quarter mile wheel standing. It was up. It was up in the air on 2 wheels, and we ran the whole track. And the records at the time, where I was turning in the tens at over 125 miles an hour. This is on 2 wheels. I mean, even now that may be going a little bit faster, but not much. You're up in the air and you got the wind against you and everything. Matter of fact, what I did, a little detail, you had the wheel wells and that thing would kind of lift it off the air. I think what happened was with Dave, what happened is that it lifted the rear wheels off one of the rear wheels, and it probably twisted the truck. That might have what caused the accident. So what I did on my new truck is I cut 3 2-inch wheels in the wheel well, so that the air could flow through that. It came, before we did that, it came down nicely like a 3-point landing. But after we did that, it kind of just slammed down, because you couldn't play with the engine with a supercharger. You couldn't go on and off of it. You know what I mean? You'd blow a gasket. You might throw a rod or something like that. You had to be on it fully or off it. And but in the second truck, of course, the first truck we kind of just aimed it. We played with tire pressure to try to keep it straight on the track. Had no way of steering it. But the second truck, I was able to put on these dual spot disc brakes. In other words, 2 of the pads would stop it with your foot brake, and each of the other pads would be a right, one for the right, one for the left. So if you up in the air, it started floating one way, you could pull the right one and it would come back on the track. You could steer it while it was in the air.
So basically,
so
basically you're steering it with the brakes.
That's correct. Just like the old tractor plow. Right. That's what we did. And that's I got a tip from some of the other competitors about that. In fact, one guy called Roy Trevino, his name was. He used to run a little Chevrolet wheel stander, and he told me what he was doing. I kind of got my tips from him. I learned a lot from some of the other professionals. It was a very friendly group, even though we caravanned around the country. In those days, there was about a dozen of us. I don't know how many there are left now on doing that, but it was quite entertaining and very popular back then, the wheel standers.
So,
excuse me. So,
is there still wheel standing going on today, or is that pretty much died out?
Yeah, there still is. As a matter of fact, there's a fellow who's my age who's still doing it. And just up until the last couple of months ago, one of the guys I used to race against was still doing it. Bob Riggle, his name was. He used to run a car called the Hemi Under Glass. He used to have the engine in the back of the Barracuda, and he would do a wheel stand by looking at, he had a cutout in the floor, and he would look through there to keep it on the track. Now, he did a demonstration with Jay Leno one day. I don't know, you can get it up on YouTube, where they tried it around Jay Leno. He took Jay Leno around in a parking lot, but he happened to turn it while it was in the air and flipped it over. It was, oh man, it was caught all on camera, and it's a pretty popular YouTube clip with Jay Leno and Bob Riggles, the Hemi on the glass. He kind of wrecked the car. They didn't get hurt. They had a roll bar and everything else. They were only doing about 35, 40 miles an hour.
Oh, good. Well, so I was going to say,
So
it sounds like there was a certain amount of danger involved in doing this. You had to be careful. You had to be pretty careful doing this. It sounds a little bit.
They're very, right. Yeah, in the beginning, they, when I got out of it after the first truck, they NHRA started a safety program. We had to pass a test. You had to get signed on by another driver. I could have got a grandfathered in, but I was out of the business for a year or so. So I had to actually go through the the practice of getting my license signed off by a track owner and a side-by-side. They used to have side-by-side racing on two wheels too. And I had to get it signed by one driver who already had a license, which I did. One of the guys signed it for me. And it is dangerous. I had a little incident myself they had a big wheel standing show at and you probably could get this online too, at Three Rivers Stadium, where the Pirates Steelers used to play years ago. They set up a drag racing bonanza there from the home plate to the center field. It was kind of a short, 400-foot type thing, and it was kind of crazy. They put up these railroad ties, and they put these big diamond plates down over the turf. They didn't want to wreck the turf. And so they put these diamond plates all the way to the end of the truck. But the thing is, there was only one way of getting out of the stadium with one big door. You had to if you were passing the guy, you had to cut in front of him to get down to the door. They had a bunch of haystacks up against the center field bleachers. And I happened to do a wheel stand there, and I hit one of the railroad ties and busted a rear axle. Did a spin around with a whole bunch of people standing on the side. And luckily, I almost wiped a few out, but I got lucky and didn't.
Let me ask.
That's what happened in Pittsburgh. What's that?
Let me ask you this. Where did you do all this work on these vehicles? I mean, this is pretty heavy duty stuff. Changing engines, right, doing all this sort of thing.
Right. Well, the first truck was sponsored by a fellow by the name. He sold racing equipment in Boston, Harris Sales. He's still around today, 92 years old. And he owned Harris Sales, and he sponsored my truck, and he had a big place in the back where we could work on it. And it was being worked. The first truck was being worked on at Commonwealth Dodge, while Dave and Leo were working there, a big Dodge dealer. And but he found they quit there and wound up working on it at Harris Sales after the first truck, because that's only a few months. The second truck was sponsored. My brother-in-law owned the gas station in Stoneham, Kearney Brothers. And a funny thing, Kearney brother, my sister's husband, and I said he needed some money from me, and I said, well, I'll make a deal with you, Dick. if I can build my truck, and he worked on it. He was a great mechanic too. I made him the boss wrench. He was a machine shop guy and everything else, so he was able to balance the engine and blueprint it and everything else. And we worked on it in that gas station in Stoneham, 490 Main Street. So I made a deal with him. I lent him some money so he could open up the place. He went in business with his brother there. And the truck was worked on out of that gas station. We stored it there and worked on it there. And then, of course, I bought myself a truck to tow on. I built a camper on a GMC cab over flatbed, and we went around the country, towing the. I backed that A100 back onto that and made it kind of a camper above it. Another crew chief of mine was a carpenter, and he did it for me. So we used all the tools and skills we had to do it, and we did that for 4 years. Traveling all around the country, and it was. A lot of the other guys were in it for even more than that. Bill Golden, who passed away, he's the one who talked me into the toy business. It's because the toy company called me up and wanted to make a toy, and I said, "Well, I thought it might have been a scam." I said, "Let me call. Oh, we're gonna make one from Bill Golden, the Little Red Wagon." So I called up Bill. He says, "Rich, this is back in 2000. I had been out of it for almost 20 years." So he says, "Rich, this is money from the sky. Are you kidding me?" Blah blah blah. Okay. So I went along. I signed a contract with Playing Mantis toy company, and they made 100,000 toys. They made I think 50,000 Little Red Wagons, and they had 3 series actually. They made my Dodge Material, and then later on they made the Dodge Fever in the small, the 164 die-cast, and then the other toy, the Lindbergh plastic model, they made the Dodge Material, and then just recently I had they were doing slot car races, and one of the my plastic model was put together by the guy who ran the slot car drag strips, and just a couple of weeks ago, we up in Hudson, Mass, at the Elks, we had the slot car racing up there, where there I was racing after some 50 some odd years. And it still had a little good reaction time, So we did that just a few weeks ago. So meantime, some of all my old competitors have passed on. They're racing up in that big drag racer in the sky right now.
So now, if they sold 100,000 of these models, obviously there still must be a following. There must be people who are interested in this.
Yeah, well, actually, they made them classics, which means they just stamped them out once and that's it. So they became a collectible toy. So you can't get any. They're not remaking them. And as a matter of fact, the Lindbergh company, I reordered them a few times, and now that they went out of business, so you can't get that anymore.
Okay.
You might be able to find one online, up on eBay or something like that. But the funny thing, the Dodge Fever became worldwide famous because of the internet. Not because that Dodge Fever became more famous than the Dodge Material. The Dodge Fever only ran for about 4 months. Where the Dodge Material was around for about 3 or 4 years. But because of the internet, the Dodge Fever became more popular than the Dodge Material truck. Plus, Chrysler was sponsoring the Dodge Fever in the beginning. Their advertising place, BBD&O, it was sponsored a couple of truck openings. One up in Maine, I actually got arrested up there because the state cops told the owner of the place, you know, he better not go on the highway there, Route 1. They're right on Route 1 up in Maine, Presque Isle, Maine, way up in the boondocks. But nobody told me anything about it. And they cleared out the front, and I was doing wheel stands in the front, the front of the place. And I went on the street maybe about 6 inches or something. And they wound up coming over and dragging me out of the truck and take me to jail. You could believe that.
What
So
year
I had
was
made the
this?
front page of Presque Isle News. Race driver arrested.
What year was?
1968.
Wow.
1968. This happened I think June, the end of June of 1968. And in fact, I was able, a couple of years ago, I was able to get from their library the newspaper article about it. And the library's since, gone, but they did still have in their archives an article about race driver arrested in Presque Isle demonstration.
Now,
and they were explaining how the truck worked and so forth, right?
Now, was it a state policeman or a local policeman?
Yeah, it was a state police.
Figures.
It's a fun. What happened was a funny thing. They came over and told the owner. The owner didn't tell my mechanic, so I never even knew. I wasn't going to go out in the street anyway, but I just happened to roll out about a few inches. Sure. And that's when they come in and commandeered me and takes me away in the thing, and my partner went crazy. What the, So I wound up paying a $45 fine, I think it was, for illegally operating an unregistered stock car. That's what they charged me with. But what happened after those runs, they had an old airport where we continued the run, because I was there for 3 days, So they had like about 300 people that showed up, and that was the biggest crowd ever up in Presque Isle. It's kind of spread out potato country, Presque Isle potatoes. And when 300 people show up at a dealership, that's a monster crowd back up there, So that was another experience I had.
Well, when you were doing all this, did you have a day job?
Well, I would. I used to manage a mom and pop store in Brookline on Amory Street, Schmirler's brothers. Matter of fact, one of the young guys used to play football for the Buffalo Bills and the Patriots, Freddie Schmirler's. I used to drive him around in the little Jeep delivering groceries. Yeah, I did that during the winter and took the summers off when I was racing. So I did that for a while, but then I did it full time for a while, racing, that is. And I, got out of I was in the grocery business because my dad, who was in the wholesale fruit and vegetable business, that was one of our accounts. And so when my dad closed up his business, I decided, they offered me a job over at to manage the store in Brookline, and I took it. I became friends with all the Schmellers guys,
So,
matter of fact, one of the kids is he goes around, he referees basketball games. To this day, he referees games in Medford High School basketball games,
Interesting.
So he comes all the way from Framingham and referees basketball games in Medford and other cities,
So what are you driving now? What's your car like now?
Okay. Well, I've had a 2004 Dodge Durango Hemi, 5.7 Hemi since 2004. Bought it new, and I use it, for towing. I got a trailer that I bring I got a summer place up in Camp Eaton in Maine. I got a trailer up there in the summertime. So in the winter, we take down the screen room and all the furniture belongings. I put in a trailer and I park it over Donna's nephews in the wintertime. And then they open up the 1st of May for 6 months in the summer, and I bring it up there and unload it and set up my screen room again against the trailer. So that's the 2004. But I use Donna and I have a 2023 Honda Passport now, and it's a pretty nice little car. It's got all the bells and whistles, and we just got that last April. So that's what I got. That's what I got now. Nothing. I did have a little hot Civic 2.0 C with the turbocharger, pretty quick, and used to get 40 miles to the gallon. But I had traded that in along with her old Passport, 2 cars, and for the 1 new Passport. So that's what I've had. Okay. I used to have a '94 Park Lane Mercury. I bought from one of my old girlfriends. I had that for a few years, and it finally rotted out in front of me. They took it away. But some of the cars I used to have, one of the cars that I owned for a little while, I paid $1,800 for. It was a 429 Boss Mustang '69. Today that car is worth $250,000 if I'd have kept it. Yeah. $250,000. Well, and if you can find one, what's it called, a single overhead cam. That was Ford's only Hemi they had, called single overhead cam Hemi, and I had that. That there I raced, believe it or not. That was a 4-speed with 444 Detroit lockers on them, and I raced that up on Lynn Marsh Road. Everybody used to go to Lynn Marsh Road. You know how straight that is. You're running from Revere to Lynn. We used to bring that up to way over 120 during that little run. That was back in 1970, 71, 72 maybe. Had that just for a few months. And the other car I had was a '64 427 Ford. It also had the Detroit lockers in it. 4-speed 427, two 4-barrel carbs, and 425 horsepower. That was a quick car too. Only had that for a few years.
Let me ask you this: what do you think about the racing business today?
Well, the racing business is big business, especially NASCAR and even drag racing now. It's all been kind of nationalized and taken over by sponsors. And you've got to be in that top 10 or 20 of the fastest guys around to be able to compete. Although they do have all these classes down below that the local guy can kind of put together. And the New England Dragway does that, and they have, a lot of the old guys. Matter of fact, that meeting I had with the slot car up there, those are some of the old timers that they have in this. They call it a nostalgia fest. They have it every January. The guy who runs it used to run an altered car or a gas, or I don't know what it was. Jack Brady, his name was, out of Rhode Island. But all these guys used to come from Malden. A lot of the race guys used to come from Malden. And matter of fact, one of the kids who unfortunately got killed in the class of 1959 was a hot rodder named Paul Grasso. Everybody remembered him. In fact, his daughter looked me up one time thinking I knew her dad. I knew her dad only in high school. I didn't pal around during racing or anything. But he got killed up on 93 racing somebody, and got run off the road. And she never knew her father because she was pregnant. She was pregnant with his wife or girlfriend at the time, and she wanted to know him. So she came to me thinking I knew him, but I did have some Class Day movie film, because what happened since I got out of racing and I got out of cabbing, I got into the video business. I'm video transfer, and luckily, what I also did during those times, I had a film crew with me, so I was able to film all the old races, and I collected a lot of film, and then so I wound up opening up a video transfer company. It was originally called American Video. Now it's Hollywood Production. And we wound up, a couple of my vendors go to all these car shows, and we sell some of these. We put these videos together of the old racers, and they sell them at the tracks and other old car shows. They're very popular now, and especially here in the summertime. But one of my vendors has moved down to Florida, so he's doing it all year long down there. He's 92, believe it or not. That's that Harris fellow I was talking about, who originally sponsored my car. So he, so they that's part of their paraphernalia. They sell nostalgia stuff, and that's what I do now. I still do that now. I still hang in there and transfer old movies and family films and old pictures onto video or USB thumb drives, so people could watch their old movies. Even if they had VHS, we transfer that onto either DVD or thumb drive.
Sure.
And that's what I do currently. One time, one of the fellows who went to school graduated in 1962. His name was Zaslaw. They lived up in the Lawrence Estates off of Lincoln Street, and his dad used to say to me, "Rich, work till you drop." So I took his advice.
Right.
Here I am, still working at 82. Hopefully, I can continue.
Excellent. Well, listen, Richie, it's been really nice talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I got
Okay.
a lot of interesting stories there. So
That's good. I'm glad I got him. I'm glad and my Alzheimer's didn't kick in, and I was able to I was able to remember a lot of them. I was down at the library the other day, the Bloomberg Library, and they have I was very impressed with the room they have for the historical.
Oh, yeah.
The historical. I found on the shelf the 1959 yearbook there.
Oh.
And there it was. It's a nice little room. I hope maybe we could put displays over there.
Okay.
So.
Well, thanks very much.
But,
go ahead.
Okay.
Have a good
All right,
night.
John. Nice talking to you. Keep me informed.
I will.